welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And this week we return to our must-see horror feature. And the one that we've scratched off this week is The Day of the Triffids from 1962.
This was actually a Bobby's pick as well. So we were talking about what films we should cover, and the must-see horror poster that we've got is very kind of jumbled. We often say this; it
Yeah,
has all your classics on there, and then they just seem to throw in some random, other ones that just don't feel like they fit, such
yeah,
as Death Race 2000, which we previously covered.
yeah.
And I always remember my dad telling me about Day of the Triffids when I was young. Like, I'm not sure why. It's just sticks in my head so clearly that he just one day told me about a movie where people were, blinded by a meteor and then plants ate them. And I saw it and I was like, fuck it, let's watch Day of the Triffids.
Yeah, yeah.
And it
I
was an
think,
interesting.
yeah, I think, because my dad used to have the book and the audio book, and also he had a VHS of one of the
Oh,
Day of the
okay.
Triffids, and I think I remembered him saying about how good it was. But I'm pretty certain it was, and this might be the same one for your dad. I feel like it was the '80s TV version that they really loved because it's when it would have been
Potentially.
like their peak time.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have been more their like peak, like when they were like, well, younger than even that kind of thing, that they were like,
Yeah.
that is the Day of the Triffids. It could have been this original one, but I feel like it might be more of the classic, the '80s one, which many people say the BBC made TV miniseries that many
Yeah.
people say is a very good adaptation.
I,
Whereas,
I could imagine maybe because you
where,
get like a lot of these films that were originally like 50s or 60s sci-fi films that were remade in the 70s and 80s. So you had the
yeah,
Blob, and then you've got
War of
Invasion
the
of the Body
Worlds.
Snatchers, War of the Worlds,
Yeah,
obviously Day of the Triffids, and then there was stuff like The Thing, The Fly. So it was kind of like I had like another boom or resurgence. So maybe that's the one that they were on about because
yeah,
what
yeah.
we watched
There's
was
several
different.
iterations of all of those, isn't there? Like these
Yeah,
creature features have come around and around several times. I mean, it is again. There's a Day of the Triffids in the work right now, like either a TV series or a mini or a movie that's in the works right now. It was made. They had a 2009 one with Gray Scott and Brian Cox and uh,
yeah,
uh yeah, which also I think was fairly liked, but a bit too much. They tried too hard with like CGI of 2009 to make it for a good TV series or something like that. But no one else has ever made another movie of this, though. It's only ever been TV series since then. So
well, it is a bit of a. I could see why because it is also kind of a bit of like a strangely globe trotting, or maybe not quite globe, but European trotting
yeah,
film, and it's like it, I could imagine it probably working better as a TV series because there were moments that it just seemed to jump around. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
we'll kind of get into it, but as always, if you listen to the show and you forgot to, just remember to hit that subscribe button and please leave us a lovely review as the meteor shower begins. And
yeah.
it opens up with that kind of like classic 60s, orchestral soundtrack that you get in, in sci-fi movies of this time. And then you get like a voiceover as well, which is always that kind of like old timey, like it was January in 1962
Yeah, the
when
narrator.
meteor shower. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
kind of love that.
and they always kind of show something off as if it's like when like sometimes in the very old like Disney ones, they used to like show a storybook at the beginning, and it would have this nice, and it's like we're starting a story. Whereas in
Yeah,
this one, it has like it's in like the botanical gardens, and it's showing off real plants and like as if it's like real footage, and then it shows off the Triffid as if it's just now an everyday normal like plant. as if it comes this normal planet, and then it's like now as if we will begin the day of the
Yeah.
Triffids. It's like a little introduction that they have, don't they?
Yeah, and we get the we get like who's probably one of my favorite characters, who is like the security guard in the botanical gardens. But we'll kind of get to him a little bit when we get there.
Yeah.
Because you get like I think it opens up with some really kind of cool of its time effects of the meteorite shower.
Oh
The
yeah, I love
meteorites
that.
coming to Earth and then kind of imploding in the atmosphere, and it's kind of like these flashes, isn't it? But
Yeah, these
it
light.
looks really quite cool.
It does, yeah. I like the way it's one of those things, obviously, because they don't quite have the technology to do those things. They kind of
Yeah,
just have to show it in more subtle ways. But I actually think like the use of lights like really effective in these older films. Like
yeah,
I sometimes think some of these watching some of the way that they kind of do it in this like subtle way kind of makes me reflect on like more modern day films and that need to like show every detail. Like
yeah,
and I feel like this kind of leaves some of the mystery to what's happening. You're not quite sure if it's them coming down or if it's them being changed. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of
yeah.
leaves a little bit more open to interpretation. Whereas
There's a
in
bit
a
of
modern
ambiguity.
yeah, whereas in a more modern film, you'd probably have like we're literally seeing the meteorites flying through space, and then it like bursts
Yeah,
down, and then you see it exploding, and like you see so it hit the ground and cause a huge like explosion. And if it's Michael Bay or something like that, it would be several more explosions for
yeah,
no reason. but
yeah.
I kind of
But
like
it's
the subtlety of just the little flashes, the little boom, 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 boom in the background.
yeah, and then it kind of I think it moves quite briskly because we get like the meteorite shower, and then we're introduced to the main character who I don't think I got any of the names of the characters
I
in
think
this
it's
film
Bill
somehow.
Bill Masson, Mason,
Bill Masson,
Mason, or
Bill
something like that.
Mason,
Yeah.
who and I fucking like part of when I love watching back films from the 60s and from like to periods where things are just so different now. I love
Yeah.
that this guy's in hospital with like bandages over his eyes and he's just smoking a cigarette in bed.
Yeah.
It just makes me always think like. Imagine if you went to like a hospital ward now and everybody was just smoking
Yeah,
cigarettes.
just
I fucking
yeah,
love that.
yeah. Just walking in, and you've got everyone, or everyone's just got a full-on vape just going, like in the middle of the
Everyone's
hospital.
vaping,
Wow.
lead line paint, lead painting on the walls. Everybody's just like taking experimental drugs.
Yeah, and I also of these times, and obviously it still happens today as well. But of the time, of course, the main lead man in a story that was more of a British story anyway has to be an American in London. It has to be an
Oh yeah,
American
it's got to be.
male lead in the surrounded by these British
Yeah, of
stereotypes.
course. And he's got a real hairy chest, and this is like before it came into. This is like back in the day when being handsome was just basically being like the equivalent of working on like a building site, or just being like a little bit maybe like chubby, but you're real like hair, just hairy. You're not
Yeah,
muscly, you're not ripped, you're just like an average guy. And you work in
yeah,
the merchant navy or something like that, and it's just like, this is our hero.
yeah,
And
yeah,
how will he know that he's in the merchant navy? Well, he'll say it as his first, like one of his first lines, and he'll wear a captain's hat for the whole film.
yeah. I love that. I do like. I love it. It's like that dashing hero, except at the same time, it's like you can never quite tell whether they're like in really good shape or they're actually like fat
Yeah,
blokes just put in a really tight top or something like
yeah. And if they
that.
they just like can't run 100 meters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it was fun. It was a good opening, and there's a lot of moments like that throughout the film where it just catches me, and it's like you're watching like a product of its time, and it just makes you laugh, man.
Yeah, I mean, both the novel and kind of the opening within this film, that whole the man in bed has been reused in so many different horrors and films
Yeah,
like Danny Boyle for 28 Days Later was inspired by the Day of the Triffids for
yeah,
the opening, the amazing opening in 28 Days Later. And other ones, like The Walking Dead has a very similar kind of one, like in the
yeah,
TV, like the first, in the good first couple of seasons. And it works. It's so effective that like whole, the guy that's separated has no idea what's happened when they kind of come
Yeah,
out of something, because it kind of makes that real like fish out of water kind of moment. It kind of allows the audience to feel like they're discovering stuff with the main character.
yeah.
You
Keeps
know,
them in the dark, doesn't it? And then you
yeah,
also have like more so in the case of Day of the Triffids, it's something that happens like quickly and overnight. So it's almost
yeah,
like just like random circumstance that he isn't you know in the same situation as them
yeah,
because
yeah,
if he'd have had his operation like a week before or a couple of days before, he'd be taking the blindfold off, and it's like a global event. Everybody's watching this like really rare meteor shower, and he's just like, oh, he's even like, can't I take them off and just have a quick look? You
yeah.
know, and they're like, no, you got to
It's
take
a
them off.
weird one because it's a real I forgot about the blind part because I have seen or read The Day of the Triffids a very very long time ago, and I've completely forgot the whole blind part of the that it
Yeah,
blinds the people and stuff like that. Although to be fair, in this film it is very inconsistent the explanation as to why some people are blind, because it was like everyone's watching it, so anyone who was watching it was blind, but then at the same time it's also like people that were underground or people that were, weren't actually or inside buildings at the time when they said it happened.
yeah,
They're blind, and it's like there's one when he's out of hospital, like he goes to the bank and the guy's like blind, like as if he was like it just suddenly everyone just went blind. It's like a lot of you people
yeah.
are saying you were inside at the time it happened though. So then how were you watching the meteor? You know what I
I
mean? So
mean,
it's kind of like
there's a lot
it's
of that
like,
though.
did it just happen or did it not happen? Like it's a bit of an odd one, but yeah, yeah. I do think that whole him being like stuck out there is a really interesting is an interesting way to open any horror film. And I think the only difference here is that normally when that happens, you normally see most of it from the point of view of from one character for quite a while.
Yeah,
So everything's discovered. Whereas the one thing that deviates here, and I know in the novel you're only really finding things out from his perspective,
yeah,
but here, it's a case of we also then also meet other characters at the same time, like side by side, because that's when the lighthouse part comes into it.
and the lighthouse part for me just felt so like disconnected from the whole story. It
Yeah,
really felt like it was. I don't know if it's in the book. I know my
yeah.
dad's read the book. I haven't,
No, it's not.
and it
Uh,
felt so disconnected.
yeah,
There's just like this random guy, and
his
like
this
his wife
researcher
maybe.
for like
Yeah,
marine biologist researcher and his wife, but also she seems to be somewhat of a scientist, something of a scientist
no, it's
myself.
the '60s. She can't be a
Yeah,
scientist.
she can't be a
Women aren't
scientist.
allowed to
Well,
be the '60s.
she's his assistant.
She's his assistant. That's
She's
he's allowed to
assistant
be.
who has sex with him. I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's it. That's all that they
I
were allowed
mean,
to do in the '60s.
so this wasn't in the original film or the original script. This whole part of the film. The
Yeah,
lighthouse part was not part of the original script at all. It's not in the original book. They made this film, and by the time they'd filmed the content that they only had 57 minutes of usable footage. So
yeah,
they had to go and reshoot and add something to add, basically flesh out the film. So they decided to add in this whole subplot of the lighthouse and this whole subplot of like how they're going to find out how to stop the Triffids, which again is not something in the original book.
yeah. Because
So
it's another. It's
this
a
is
good
all
like
shoehorned
35
in there.
minutes. Yeah,
Yeah,
good
yeah,
35 minutes, man.
yeah.
Of
It's
just
all shoehorned in there.
lighthouse trapped in.
Yes. So like everything with Bill Mason is like the main film, and then they realized that oh shit, we had to. So they ended up having to go back and reshoot and add in this whole sequence just for that reason. It's kind of
Yeah,
amazing. Like it's kind of mad that that's the case, but like I've not heard of it where they basically like started editing and went, we haven't got enough film. Like we
yeah,
haven't made a long enough film. Like you haven't even hit the hour mark. Like we could have gone for like a 70-minute film, but you haven't even hit that. You've got
yeah. You're just
50 on it.
shy of a
I
fucking
think I think they
yeah.
said the cut ended up coming in at like 57 minutes long, and they were like, that's not long enough for a film to be released in the cinema. So you need to go back and add something. So they had to go back and reshoot that whole part.
I
Um,
mean, there are some good, especially kind of in in the opening parts, there are the main bit that I'm thinking of is when he is walking through London,
Yeah,
and he's saying that he wants to get back to his ship, and he's going through London, and everybody is just kind of like stumbling around blind. Although I get this thing of like, if it happened overnight, right? So the meteor shower, you're watching it, and then you go to bed, and then you
yeah,
wake up and you're blind. Everybody's dressed like
yeah.
they're
There
going
what
to
that
work and stuff,
yeah.
which makes me think like, did everybody wake up and be like, "Oh, I'm completely fine," and then it happened, or was it like I don't think there's
That was
a
why I
logical
was like,
explanation.
how did like the guy in the bank in there said it was happening? But I was like, so wait, so it happened at night, but you guys are acting as if it just suddenly happened, like it was happening outside, and suddenly you've gone blind.
Yeah,
Like some of them were acting more like they've just all gone blind, and the meteorite only just happened. And I was like, wait, what? Yeah, it's very confusing. It's not very well thought out at all. It's like you're not going to get up and leave your house. Like it should be pretty much almost completely empty because everyone's just like
yeah,
that. And then it's like people that were on a whole train that
yeah,
like the people that were on a train and they're all like, so you got to assume that maybe it took effect later. Like
yeah.
it's not. So that's how people are just like suddenly they were like, but yeah, there is mention of people waking up blind. So it's like, okay, what?
It's weird. And speaking of the train, the train scene where there's like, I don't know if it's a crash or if it just comes to a stop, and then everybody's clambering off and stumbling around, and we find the orphan. I can't
Susan.
remember, Susan. There you go. We find the orphan, and she's like, oh, I was stowed away in the carriage, I didn't see it. And then there's like a blind guy who's like grabs her and he's like, "Come with me, like
Yeah,
you're gonna be my eyes."
you're
And
my eyes from now
you're my
on.
eyes, yeah. And he just abducts this kid, and then and then this like, what's his name? Is it Bill?
Yeah, Bill.
Bill is like, "What are you doing with that kid there?" And then he's just like, he just abducts the kid. The kid's like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I don't have I'm an orphan. I don't have anywhere to go." He's like, "That's fine. Come with me to
come with
my
me. Yeah,
ship.
I'll just take you off. Yeah.
I'll just take you off." And then nobody ever speaks about it again. And
No,
it's like, it's such. I don't know if it feels like very of its time, where they're just like, "He's your everyman. He's not a diddler. You can
yeah,
trust him. He's fine. Don't think about it at all. Don't put too much thought into this man taking this orphan away." you know,
yeah. It's a
Think
weird
bizarre.
scenario to be like, oh yeah, that's fine, kid. I'll protect you. I'll just take you off. Why not?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm a Navy man. You can trust me.
you can. Yeah, you can trust me. I'm a navy man. It's yeah. But it's like,
There are loads of like really kind of odd like you've got like the doctor when the doctor tells Bill about like
yeah,
obviously everything that's happened, and he's like this like he's like telling him like, oh, these strange effects are happening and things like that. We don't quite know what to do, and then he sends him off to the other room, and then the doctor just jumps through the window, and there's not really any like reasoning for it. Like in fact the doctor's kind of talking about how people are going to have to like go to get through this, and the doctor's just
yeah.
like he's just like, there's no real reason. Like you're going to be blind, but I'll help you. But fuck me, I'm blind. I'm not doing this.
I'm off.
I'm done, mate. I'm out. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
blind. Fuck this. Like it just seems it's like out of nowhere. It's just like the doctor's dead.
I thought he got, because I looked away for like a split second, because I'm like writing notes on my phone. So I jotted something down, and then when I heard the smashing glass, and then I looked, and Bill like looked at the window, and I was like, maybe he was grabbed by he
A
was
Triffids,
yoinked by a
yeah,
Triffid. But the streaming service I was using can be really finicky with rewinding and stuff. So I was just like, I've just got to assume that that's what happened,
yeah,
which would have made sense, because I'm
yeah,
sure after this they start talking about the Triffids, goblin people, because there's the the security guard Rip who gets gobbled up, and I
yeah.
know that
In
he's got
the Royal
sandwiched in
Botanical
two.
Gardens
Yeah,
in London, yeah, he gets the yeah, he gets like that slice across the face. So this is our first
yeah,
proper. This is the first proper death.
yeah,
We get that. We get that. Like he sees it coming towards him, and the Triffids been given. I was kind of thinking it had almost like arachnid like form in some of these early scenes, like the darker scenes, because it kind of
Yeah.
looks like it's got like a kind of exoskeleton to it, almost a little bit, almost like scorpion like or something like that. It's got like a little bit of a that kind of to its body kind of thing.
And when
Um,
it's like crawling on the floor,
yeah,
it looks more like that because there's actually a really quite a cool shot where he's sat there peeling his two boiled eggs that he's having for his late lunch, and you see the Triffid like sliding along the ground behind him, and it's a really cool shot. And in that scene, I was like, yeah, the Triffids don't look like just like plants. You know, they kind of have like a bit more of like a animalistic form to them. And then
yeah,
when it attacks him, it does like gobble him up. You can see it's got like a clear mouth, and it's got like a kind of like it almost has like a face, for lack of a better word. You know, it kind of has a head or
yeah. It has a
inside of it.
yeah. I was gonna say. I mean, I really liked I liked the look of it and the odd kind
Yeah,
of, and there was almost like an odd like redness in this kind of green blackness that you could kind of see in these scenes when it's very hidden. I really liked it. Um, it it is a bit later on when we just sort of start to really see them that it kind of
yeah,
lose. It really starts to lose an effect later. But during like this bit, like I like the whole vine. I like the fact that he kind of get like slashed before he gets like pulled in.
yeah,
It's kind of a it works really nice. It is really cool. But um, yeah, it's just weird. You know, it's weird having all of the blind people go around with this one guy and taking a child, and like all of these scenes are very like all kept thinking was I don't know why it went into my head. This naval officer go around. It's just like what we didn't know is that he's actually a giant diddler, and he just goes around molest. He just goes
yeah.
around molesting all these blind people.
He's just taken that. He's like, this has worked out perfectly for me, and
I
I don't
also
have to serve in the navy anymore.
I also love that because they've got the siren like the war sirens going off and the announcements going
Yeah,
over, and he was like, try to stay in one place. You will injure yourself, and don't try to start fires. Like I just loved that whole don't try to start fire. Like if you don't try to do things, you may start a fire. And I was just like, who the hell's blind and then goes their first thought is I must make fire.
yeah. In
I
a
must
city as
make
well.
fire.
In a city,
It's so
I'm
dark. I can't see.
yeah. Maybe
Maybe if
this will
I make
help.
fire.
Oh, I'm freezing. I can't figure out how to turn the heating on. I must set my curtains
Yeah.
on fire.
Just someone
It's
just
so
setting
weird.
themselves like they're setting their hair on fire because they just keep lighting matches in front of their
Yeah,
face.
somebody
This will help me see.
somebody who went blind as they were carrying a little candle around in the nightie, and they're like, "Oh no, now I just have to run around with this candle." It's kind of a weird thing, isn't it? Because I don't
Yeah.
think like societal collapse would happen quite that quickly. You know, it'd be
No.
terrifying. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it would happen quite like that. Because I'm sure it feels like when they decide to like leave the train station, um, they're driving through and there's like fires in London, and I was thinking like, where did all these fires come from? Like,
Yeah.
I imagine electrics will be fine. It's just eyes, and people will probably be like, I'm not just gonna start a fire. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna start like
It's just people
tinkering with
crashing around.
stuff.
Yeah. Just
Yeah,
people tripping over and crashing around or just literally like burning places down. They're like, I must
yeah,
burn it. I will be able to see it if I can burn it down.
yeah. If
Yeah.
the fire will give my vision back.
Yeah. But no, like I mean, like those fire seeds, like one definitely though, like at least this opening, it's inconsistent in its plotting, but at least it's quite a cool opening. It's a cool setup for a film, like a
Yeah,
sci-fi horror. And like I just mentioned before, a lot of those scenes of the empty London, I think they're just really cool. These landscapes that have been practically like
yeah,
not all CGI. Like there's a lot of landscapes where they've just cleared them out and they've cleared out certain areas and they haven't had to CGI it. It's just these actual like
yeah,
shut down these. I do think it's really cool getting to see these different parts and the parts around London and stuff like that, just empty and just seeing like nothing there. And um yeah, but this is when it so quickly goes into like oh we're just gonna start to leave. We're just gonna start to head off. Like he takes that girl Oh, and there was a scene that made me laugh, and it don't think obviously not on purpose, but the bit when the girl is drinking from a water fountain, I just thought was the just she's there, like trying to drink from this water fountain, and it's like barely pumping anything out, and he keeps asking her like questions while she's trying to take a drink, and it keeps going from like huge spout to low spout, and you can see it wasn't working for the actress,
Yeah.
and she's just there like, what the fuck is happening, like trying to get a drink, and it's like barely coming, and she's not actually taking a drink, and she's still just stood there, but he keeps asking her questions in the middle of her trying to drink. And I don't know why, but it was just such an unusual. Like I was like, why? Why did you decide to do it like this? It
I,
looks so bizarre. And then that's the same scene when Rip Dog, when the dog that's barking gets like
oh,
attacked by a
gobbled
Triffid
up.
and you
Yeah.
can't see it. Like you just
Yeah.
see it get like attacked, like it's just lying dead on the ground. Like you assume it's been hit or attacked or something by the Triffid that's nearby.
Yeah. Although I thought the Triffid would have just gobbled it whole, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I
I,
don't know, but they're just like I think it's just something to react to, like, oh my god,
it's a dead dog.
that dead
We need to
dog.
get out there. That dog could be me next time, you know? I
Yeah,
yeah, it was a there was another scene that kind of made me like crease up, and it was when it was the it was in the plane. Like
oh yeah,
for some reason there was just like it's a terrifying situation, right? And it as a as like an idea it would be terrifying, but there was just something that was just so like calm about it, and it was
yeah,
just so weird that they were all just like flying there, and they were just everybody was just blind, and I don't know why. I just found like I'm trying to explain why it's funny, and it's like not funny at all. But I was just watching it like creasing, and I was thinking like, why did they put this in? Like
yeah,
tonally, it feels like really similar to something that you'd see in like a Two Ronnies sketch, where it's like
yeah,
both the pilots are blind, and
yeah.
and it
It's,
just felt
I
so
mean,
weird.
yeah, I was gonna say the chaoticness of the train scene before gave you the idea of like the panic and the things like that,
Yeah,
and that yes, there are people on transport. And the plane scene, although trying to have another kind of oh my god, people screaming and chaotic, it kind of felt like it had already been established. Like we get the point,
yeah,
we get it. It
and I
didn't
get
need a
it's to
scene of
be like
people like falling on each other's laps. Like what? Who's on my
yeah,
lap?
and I get it's to be like these guys have accepted their fate, right?
Yeah,
And they're trying to they've kept people calm, being like, oh no, the pilots are fine, and the pilots like tell everybody we're going to land. And you're like, yeah, he's just got to fucking go into the side of a mountain,
yeah. It just boom.
He's just going, yeah, I always wanted to do this, boys. And then just takes them off. But it's just, I don't know why, it just felt so out of place. Because I'm sure it's like, it doesn't feel like it's an establishing shot. We get we follow through in London, and
Yeah,
we get the story of the lighthouse, and in between that, you see them dealing with other people, but you always have like Bill in the scene basically when you're finding out about other people. So to just randomly cut away
yeah.
to a
I do
plane
feel
with
like
no other characters,
I do feel like anything that it doesn't involve Bill is where they've added the extra stuff in to be like, we just need some padding here. We
Yeah,
just need some extra stuff because, as I said, like bit like he's kind of the main character and it is his point of view, like in the book and the story and stuff like that. So I feel like anything else, they've just been like, oh, we're not bringing the actor back in to redo stuff, so we've got
so
to
we need sub in.
we've got to pad it with some other scenes to kind of add on to it. So let's show the panic from the skies or something like that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Because at first because I think that was a point when I looked away and then this scene was happening and I was like, oh shit, are they on that plane? I was like, did I miss something? Did they just get onto
yeah,
and I was like, oh, so this has nothing to do with the hero's story kind of thing. This has none of
it's
that
just
to do with it.
a little cutaway.
Yeah, and it does just have those really random parts like that, like with our the whole lighthouse sequence, and you know, you gotta love that the fact in that other pointless lighthouse sequence that the researcher is just such an asshole straight away.
Oh yeah,
Like they don't try to make him like a nice guy. You're literally there like, ah, you're gonna die, right? You're definitely gonna die.
Yeah,
You're such an asshole straight away. Like, what is it about like all of the heroes from like the 40s to kind of 60s era? They all really had like it's maybe it's because of the haircut at the time, but they all had that like same haircut, that same kind of like chiseled, slightly bronzed kind of look about them.
of course, sun-kissed, you know.
And they all had that kind of hint of like, I'm charming, but I'll beat you if you get out of line.
That was the vibe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's what the vibe was, you know.
That was in most like hero ones. If you look at something like, Gone with the Wind or even like Casablanca or something like that, there's just that little hint of, I'm charming, you're beautiful, but if you go
But
against me, I
I'll
will beat
batter
you.
you. Yeah, and like, and they're all just like alcoholics. Like they're always like,
There's
yeah,
always a bourbon
give me a
nearby.
scotch, doll. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're always just drinking bourbon, you know. And one of that guy's first lines is like, I want to get off of this goddamn rock so I can get a bottle of Jack, and he's just like drinking it, you know. And you have a point. Like they're all just like that. Even like, you know, Bill has that vibe, you know, of just like kind of handsome, but kind of does look like, you know, your granddad in that weird
Yeah.
way of like just very yeah.
I mean, I will admit, so although, we've talked a lot about inconsistencies, for the most part, I was enjoying the opening of this. It was the point when they started to travel across, like, I didn't understand the reasoning really, like for them going to France, because all I heard was it mentioned about there being, but in France, there'll be millions of blind people. That was the line I kind of heard, and then they were kind of like, so we're going to France. It's like, I was a bit confused. I was like, why?
Yeah.
There's millions of blind people here. Why are you
Well,
going to France?
it's something to do with his ship, isn't it? He's like, there's like a, you know,
Yeah,
there's like a US Army base, and he's like, the Americans will fix it, you know.
yeah, of course they
And we saved
will.
your ass in World War II, you know, which was only 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you know. And it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, that's what I mean. It's just like he's just randomly like, oh,
Th-
we're going to France now
this
for
is the point when I
20
started to.
minutes.
I do think I somewhat lost track of what the hell was going on at a certain point here. I think I lost track of why we're going to certain places.
Oh yeah,
Like, it's 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 not quite as I've mentioned before, but this isn't really quite a true adaptation of the book. A lot of people say this isn't a good adaptation at all of the book because it kind
yeah,
of mainly just uses the bits it wants to use and then just like fuck the rest. It is much more in the vein of like a creature feature sci-fi kind of film. Like it's those surviving sci-fi events kind of from
yeah,
moment to moment. Like I do think it has some good set pieces and it's like setting showing off, but um some of them work less. And one of the parts that really kind of that comes up soon is when he's with the lady in I can't I his that
I
character, I can't remember the lady in like the manor, and that kind of thing. And like
yeah.
there's a set
Christine, we'll call her. I think
yeah,
Christine is.
there's a set piece when they go outside. Where he goes outside with I don't know if he's meant to be someone that works with her or if he's meant to be her husband or I really couldn't get the dynamic of who was who in this like relationship. But they go out and they see the Triffids moving along like out in
Yeah,
the country, and I gotta be honest, that is one of the shots that definitely kind of ruined the Triffids as a scary thing because they just didn't look right out in the daylight.
yeah.
They
When you
didn't.
get them
It didn't work.
obscured, yeah. The first one in the botanical gardens looks good, obscured in the darkness.
Yeah,
The one where when they're leaving London and the car, you know, gets in the mud and you kind of see it obscured and you see shots of it. It looks
yeah.
quite good, but when you have like a bunch of them, it just kind of looks like loads of pine trees. You
Well,
know,
it
that
just
they
looks
put.
like because they're moving along, like you can see them, like as if they're watching, I don't know, like antelope running along in the
Yeah,
wild from a distance. But instead, this looks like several things on like top of a little stumps on top of what looks like little remote control cars or something. They're being like moved
yeah,
along in the grass, and it's like they're bumping along, and you're just looking at them going, you've just like it doesn't look like moving vines like it did before. It doesn't look like this slimy or spiky kind of
yeah.
creature. it now just looks like some weird thing that's just moving along in the background, and they're like, "Oh my god, we need to get out of. We're gonna have
Yeah.
to
Oh,
move. They're
we need
getting
to go.
closer."
And then the reason bit that I thought was really funny is that is that little old man, because there was like another like 1950s, 1960s character, which was like the elderly gentleman. He's like he's a bit effeminate.
Yeah,
He's like older. He's really like short and thin. He's definitely not gay because obviously like that didn't exist until the 80s or the 90s. He's just a wealthy old man who never found love, that kind of thing. Never had any interest in love. And
yes,
then he's just like they go out to look and they see the Triffids, and then he just like I don't know if he got like attacked by them, or I'm not sure what happened because I don't think they got attacked by them. The next thing I know, that dude, like the little elderly gentleman, he's just like dead,
yeah, yeah.
and
He's
Bill's
running
carrying him
away.
over his
Yeah,
shoulders, and he just
I
like
think he
plops his little
dies.
body down.
I think he like gets hurt, and then he puts them on his shoulder, and then you hear something as if they've like fired something at them,
Yeah,
as if someone gets shot, and then suddenly Bill just like is like, "Oh, he feels different. Oh, he's dead."
yeah, and he's just like got him in like a fireman's carry. And he's just like, oh, this little effeminate man. And then he just
Yeah,
like puts him down on the ground and just leaves him.
yeah. He's just like, "Oh, fuck, you're dead. All right."
And
Like,
I was like, this character's been in it for like 10 minutes, and he's
yeah,
just turned up and died.
I do really think that there's a real. I think it was explained in the thing that basically the only reason these French sequences are even there, because again, I don't think that it's within the book. I think the only reason they're in there is because the the main lady that's there, a French actress, basically they just wanted to cast that French actress in this film
Yeah,
because they thought she's popular at the time. So they were just like, stick her in the film. It's like she has
stick
nothing to
her
do
in.
with the plot. Well then make the plot
Yeah.
around her.
Well,
Why
we can
not?
move it to we can move it to, we can move the plot to France. Why? Why not?
Yeah, and this sequence it does have one interesting set piece, but it does really dip the film down this bit.
Yeah.
I felt it really like, you know, over to France. Not a huge reason why. The one set piece that stands out is like the invasion of the plants when the convicts take over.
Oh, and they're all
Then
dancing,
yeah, the
having that weird
convicts come
party.
in, and it's interesting because yeah, like this is one of those, but this is one of the few scenes that kind of actually embraces somewhat bleakness of the actual original story. It's quite a bleak story.
Yeah.
This is one of the few bits that actually, you've got these convicts that have come in, when he gets back, and I think that's after old man died. He's come back and he's
Yeah.
like, "What's
Rip
going
off,
on
man.
here?" And it's like, oh, here they are, and they're literally like they've got all the women and they're drinking all the booze and they're putting stuff into bags, but they're also implying like they're holding the women down and like kissing the
Yeah.
like. There's a real rape aspect because they take the younger French girl and one of them's like dragging her up the stairs, like I'm taking you
Yeah.
kind of thing.
I'm taking you.
And it's quite odd
Yeah.
because to this point this has been a fairly kind of like not too like over the top, nothing that bad, but this scene kind of suddenly makes it go, oh shit, that's actually for the time.
Yeah.
This is suddenly a little bit more risky of a
Yeah. We're
move,
embracing the dark side of man.
yeah,
Like the
which is
shit that
good.
would probably
Like
happen.
I think that's the sad part of this adaptation is for the most part it doesn't. The original story was based on like basically the invasions during World War II was the inspiration of the idea of
Okay.
when bombings were going on in the skies and stuff like that, and what if basically the whole city was like, what if your friends were dead the next day, or what if they kind of inspired the idea of these like weird events,
Yeah.
these things invading that you can't control, and the way that people are changing and the way that people aren't like controlling. So that bleakness is all over the story. So then when you come to this film, it's like for the most part, it's really not bleak at all.
No.
And it doesn't have any themes of like power. It doesn't really have many themes of the powerlessness or just that you have to just survive no matter what. You're just trying to survive. Um, that's not really here. This is one of the few scenes I think that actually is like, okay, like I think this is the scene. So when this was released, this was rated an X for this film. Like X is the
Yeah.
highest rating you could get at the time. Now I understand it's the 60s, but even in the 60s, you'd already had a lot of like Hitchcock films By
Yeah,
the,
it's pretty extreme.
they're quite that had a lot more violence and things like that. So this was quite a high rating. I think it must be the signs of like the
Yeah, the
implication like
undertones.
rape and stuff like that in this scene
Yeah.
that gives it, because there's not really any other scenes apart from the fact that we're almost certain that researcher at some point is going to beat that woman.
Yeah, it's just I mean, there's always that kind of simmering threat of violence around there,
But that's
as
in
it was.
any film of the era.
Yeah, that's in any films. Yeah, that's part of the romance.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, a lot of the violence in it is very kind of fantasy-esque. Like when the Triffids invade the party, they smash through the windows and the walls, but we don't see any blood. We see gunfire. We see, as they say, like terror. We see
yeah,
people panicked and scared. We see that fucking Frenchman get hooked, which is class.
yeah,
Um, and then we even get one of the researcher on the island fends off a Triffid with a classic spear, which is like a fun little scene. But it's all it's
yeah,
all kind of like
yeah,
fantasy. There's no bloodshed, so it must be like the undertones and the implication. I
yeah.
think
The
giving it
implication,
that
it's all
rating.
about
Yeah,
that.
it's all about the
It,
implication.
Yeah, I mean that scene when they are invading, that is a cool scene. When they're crashing through the windows into the house, it is one of the coolest set pieces in the film, and it's definitely one of the better scenes in the film, all, including the implication stuff.
Yeah,
To add that kind of that bleakness that comes with it. I mean, this is them pretty much like followed like once they've cleared out, they've all of those convicts have been taken, and they run off and they rush off to get away. It all happens very. The next part happens really quickly when they go to another house, another
yeah.
set of people.
With Spain, another country.
Yeah, a different country, but it all seems like it just goes like there. Like it feels like we don't. I didn't feel like we spent very long at all with this Spanish family before it was like the Triffids are all around the house.
No, and it's literally like they go to France, like you said, for some reason, and then the convicts invade the house, and then the Triffids invade the house, and as they're driving away, it's almost like, well, I'm done with France, let's
Yeah,
get out of town, and then it's just like, oh, now we're in Spain,
Spain.
and we've gone to this another U.S. army base in Spain, which is now deserted, so we're gonna go and we just find this guy and his pregnant wife.
Yeah, it's kind of it's why they end up in certain places starts to become a little bit like, is it just connections that but it's just like searching around. It's not really like, it's not quite the driven of
Yeah,
like, oh no, I need to get across because my family are over there, or like I need to get over to my family to see if they're okay in this country or this side, or
yeah,
there's none of that kind of thing. It kind of just seems like he's just moving around to people that he is somewhat an acquaintance of, or the French lady then is an acquaintance of, or what I mean, they're
yeah,
just randomly moving. This guy's got no plan. He's like dragged this child off.
yeah. He's
He
just
has
abducted
he
this
has
fucking.
no he has no plan. It seems like he has no real plan of what it is they're going to do to survive this. Really, like
Yeah,
it seems like he's taken her to worse places than if they'd just stayed.
yeah. She just stayed. Then I mean,
Maybe
it's pretty
being
bleak.
maybe
I feel.
being a blind man's eyes would have been better for.
But yeah, they'd be fucking traipsed around Europe.
Yeah,
Because yeah, they're just they go here, and then for some reason it's like we're just gonna oh yeah, 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 you can stay with us, don't worry. Oh yeah, I'm pregnant. Oh well, that's fine, mate, we'll help you give birth, it's fine.
yeah,
And then the Triffids surround them, and it's like a lot of the times, I get that they have a bit where he's saying, well, we heard on the radio that the base has been evacuated and they've got to pick people up from this port, and
yeah.
that's effectively where you get like the plot points from. I still don't know why they went all the way to France, apart from maybe there being a base there that
Yeah.
was then in ruins, but I don't know why they went into a castle in
I
France,
was gonna say he's not in the story original book. He's not a naval captain or any
Yeah,
of these things. He is literally like a plant specialist of part. That's
it's
why
John Everyman.
that's why
Yeah,
he's involved in this kind of plot in this story. This is why he has a role. Here, he seems to not so much have a role apart from abducting small children.
Yeah, yeah, that's his role. He heard
or
women and children and thought,
yeah,
oh,
or
that's
allowing
snatching.
other people to die for him.
Yeah, rip
uh,
the little lad.
I mean, the thought that went through my head, skipping to the, I think we'll just skip to the electric fence,
Yeah, let's just go there.
them surrounding the house, invading around. You got that classic kind of like you'd think of like your zombie horde or things like that. All of the
Yeah,
Triffids, these like thousands of Triffids that are literally like all around the house. And I gotta be honest, all I could think in my head was like I was wondering whether anyone was like high as fuck while watching this film, because I feel like they'd have a proper bad fucking trip on this.
the
Because
thing is to
it
surround them.
it literally looks like, I mean, it literally looks like as if it looks like weed, literally like marijuana plants have
Yeah.
surrounded the house. Like it's like as if you were smoking something, you'd start imagining your weed was turning on you. It's
Well,
them like,
surely that's got to be where the joke came from in Scary Movie 2.
what, the
The
whole
plant.
that he's
Yeah,
smoking the plant,
they smoking the
possibly.
plant. Surely it's got to be the Triffids. Like
I mean,
as soon as I saw them, I was like, oh, that's
it's like
got to be
they start looking more and more like they're either marijuana, or I saw some people online saying they basically look like a giant asparagus, like out
Yeah, I
for
get
revenge.
that.
Like
Or
they
broccoli.
just, it's so like, and also the other weird, to add on top of this weed metaphor is the fact that they make this sound that sounds kind of like a bong. This like bubbling, like they have this kind
Yeah.
of bubbling,
Oh.
like that kind of like it sounds
Yeah.
like someone's. So I just think if you were high as hell watching that bit, you're like, oh Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
my weed's turned on me. Like
Maybe the guy who made it's really high.
they're coming for me right now. This paranoid nightmare that you'll be having. Um, yeah, you get them all surrounded, and they start to get like they go for like, it's an exciting scene because it's like that, it's all quite practical, and it's always quite fun seeing like a practical scene where they've actually like burnt, because
Yeah.
it's actual practically like they're just burning the shit out of these
Just
the
burning them. Yeah.
they've made them, and then now they're just going to burn them all to hell.
Just
maybe
destroy them.
maybe that's why a lot of these ones do not look as good a quality as the ones earlier in the
Yeah.
film,
They
because
just
they're
had to
like, well,
skimp
we're
them,
about to burn all these, so we're not spending all our budget making like 100
making
of
it look
these,
fucking class. Yeah.
yeah, just so that we can burn the shit out of them. It's quite, it's quite a cool scene seeing him burn the hell out of all of that. Um, but this is the odd part where it starts to lead to some very like very quick ending points, and very quick
Oh
like, oh,
yeah.
we need to wrap this up, we need to come up with an excuse, we need to come up with a reason. They've been burnt, and I did like the fact that you could see the Triffids started to move again after they've been burnt. They were like stunned,
Yeah.
but the burnt one started to move again, and I quite liked that. But this whole like, I mean, leading them off with a like the whole Pied Piper. Oh, we can lead
Yeah.
them away with the ice cream van music.
They're attracted to sound. Yeah, that's the idea, isn't it?
It
We should
just
use an ice cream truck that we
because
have.
this is side by side with the lighthouse,
Yeah.
with what I believe is a change that I think that they changed the original ending. I do wonder whether they embraced more of that bleak kind of,
Maybe.
in the original story. It's much more of a bleak like survival, kind of like 28 days later, kind of like they're
Yeah.
alive but they've just got to keep on living, kind of thing. They're like on the Isle of Wight, they've got to live, they've just got to try and survive and hope that one day they'll be able to like take revenge or win over,
Yeah.
or whereas I feel like by adding this lighthouse bit, they decide to add, oh no, you know what we should do? We should come up with a reason of how we can destroy them. How do we beat the Triffids?
Yeah.
Which is when we get this whole sequence of the researcher and his partner being chased through the lighthouse as they're all attacking and coming in, and
Yeah.
they're all coming up the stairs, and again on some of these shots the Triffids look a little bit better because they're not
Yeah.
always in
They do it
plain
the
view.
smaller enclosed ones. Yeah.
Yeah,
When it's not, hundreds and it's maybe like 7 or 8, maybe 10 surrounding them. It's kind of, it feels like it's that Trolls 2 thing, isn't it? Where they're like, oh, we've got, a bunch of masks that we can make that look decent. And then, oh, we need like 40 goblins. Yeah, just make them look dog shit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I do think though, like it's something that kind of is poorer for this film
Yeah,
is the fact they have to like suddenly, and we'll talk about like the what they do in a second, but like having to have the hero like a poor excuse to make the hero save the day is like
yeah,
the classic like lazy like when the creature features were just a little bit more like sometimes it was good because it was one that you could destroy, but in this case it was like a worldwide thing, so that they needed something to come up with. But it's also the fact that like I said, compared to the novel being a bleaker ending, or if I compare it to like something we've watched recently, The Birds, it
yes,
had survival, suspenseful set pieces, action set pieces, but also allowed for an ending with like a hint or sense of bleakness. Because
yeah.
although they're getting away, the birds are still there. They're still all around like
They're
this
still like
area.
constant present, aren't they? You know?
And being of a similar era of to this film, it's just the fact that you know they can't solve the problem, or even like Night of the Living Dead. Like there is no
Yeah,
like clear that they've put a bandage on it or they've just got away from it, but you know that they haven't actually stopped it. They're just trying to prevent it. Whereas the problem here is the fact that they feel like they have to give a reason for like, no, this will destroy them all. This is
yeah.
how we're
This
going to
will get
stop
rid
them
of them.
all. Like it's just it's either this the studio balked at the idea or the director or whoever just didn't have the balls to go, you know what, we're just gonna end it on a
Yeah,
it's not it's not all neatly wrapped up, you know what I mean? And I think that's why they added the lighthouse as well, to also be like we can't be that bleak, we can't just have them just getting away like they were going to. And I think that's also why it has that terrible right at the ending. It has this shot where they've added Bill and Susan in a bit where it doesn't quite look like they're actually fully there, but all the
yeah,
people are like walking up the steps towards like a church, as if we live on to go to church another day, or because we don't see after the whole this is how we're going to stop them part.
yeah,
We don't see Bill or Susan's part again, because I think that last shot where you see them driving away was going to be kind of like a bird's kind of, that's it. They got away, but that's it. Like there's no more
they've
to tell.
survived the day, but
Yeah,
who knows, you know? And
yeah,
that really it really works for films like this, especially when you establish like a global threat or something that's that's happening to everybody, just
yeah,
to then be like, nah, saltwater, mate, you know?
yeah. That's and that whole the salt water. I mean, it's just you know it. Not only is it pointless, but and it has a song, and it has a feel. It has some cool bits here where he's spraying them, and you're seeing them start
Yeah,
to melt from the salt water. Although I gotta be honest, the sign made no freaking sense to me. The sign, like we know in a second for the Triffids, the salt water is going to be highly corrosive, but the sign
yeah,
already says sea water highly corrosive for the pump kind of thing. And I'm sure if you're pumping it at high speed at someone, yes, it is corrosive, but it was
yeah.
still just like
Whittles the skin off.
it was just like seawater highly corrosive, like big sign next to his head, like I wonder if this will
I wonder
work.
this will work. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it does. It just wraps up like so quickly. You know, he sprays them. He starts spraying them with that. You get, and she's just stood there like shrieking. The same Joe the Spear fight is like, well, it's the 1960s. The woman's not going to do anything apart from have like one hand over her head, her mouth, and scream as loud as she can. And it's like a scream that just goes through you, you know.
yeah, proper
And
shriek.
then proper shriek. And then, Bill's got to drive off in the fucking ice cream van and they're going to follow him. And then I love the bit where, like, Susan and the little girl or whoever makes it to the submarine and they get on and they're like, oh no, we're going to leave in like 2 minutes unless we see him. And Bill's like climbing over all of these rocks and stuff. And then there's just like some lads in a dinghy and he just like jumps in with them.
Yeah.
It feels so out of place, you know?
Yeah, it just it's such a rush to get to that. It's such a I don't know, the whole seawater thing. It's something that was done again, I guess, in what M Night Shyamalan did it in Signs,
Yeah.
where it's like water. There's water all over the planet, so that will get rid of them. It's just like in these like situations, you kind of just have to have the people you're following have managed to live through or not live through.
Yeah, yeah,
I feel like that's your option in like a mass global, and that's where some of them fall down. Like, War of the Worlds and some of the other ones. I mean, War of the Worlds slightly different because it had the whole, it has a similar kind of excuse. The whole bacteria finally
yeah,
got to them, the diseases. That one's a little bit more clever. I think the idea that actually diseases and bacteria that you're not used to, in a way, you could see how that could affect kind of
yeah,
thing.
potentially, yeah,
Could affect. So that whole War of the Worlds kind of one, it does kind of work for that in the long kind of grand scheme, but that also works because for the most part, you mainly only see in the original story of War of the Worlds that they've managed to survive their events, and then
yeah,
it says that the bacteria took over. It's kind of what was wrong with, say, the Tom Cruise big movie is the fact that he had to be there to start to see them decomposing and start to break down. They couldn't just be like, "You've survived, you've got to safety," and then they find out like a month later that the aliens, or a week later
yeah.
that the aliens are starting to die. No, the problem with that is it had to be right, and Tom Cruise had to be part of the reason why it's like, look at that alien, look, it's not
Watch him
right,
die.
shoot that one. You know what I mean? Like that's a little bit of the problem of like the original story is much more subtle in the way that it's like the aliens started to die because they
Yeah,
later found out that it doesn't have to be right in your face, but this is one that's like right in your face. It's like, right, everyone, grab your water pumps and let's start getting these bastard Triffids down.
yeah. It's
Just
so weird.
shooting them in the streets with salt water and like
It just comes out of nowhere, man. And like you
they
said,
don't.
unless you can get a satisfying ending to wrap it up, you should. The safest thing is just to go for the ambiguity. Like, yeah, the characters survive that evening, or they survive that, but then what happens? I think that's why the end of the birds is so masterfully done,
Yeah,
because you part of you expects them to fix everything and to have the voiceover of like, well, it turns out that the birds didn't quite like corn and they eat corn and die, because it's always like that. However,
the
that
rice.
shot, yeah, the
Throw
rice,
rice
they
everywhere.
ate rice instead and they died. And then the shot of them driving as all the birds are watching them leave, you're like,
Yeah,
they're fucked, man.
yeah.
Everyone's fucked,
It's
most
like
likely.
going off. It's like that classic "Off into the Sunset," but with a dark kind of
Yeah,
undertone. Like that's where like this kind of one's masterfully done, and this is where sadly this one is not. Like this is a film that is such a choppy mess of like you can feel the way that they've cut stuff in, stuff feels out of place. It doesn't feel like they really thought it through. You know what I mean?
no,
Which is sad because it has what is deemed a very strong science fiction like novel to base off of, and
yeah,
they've kind of just mashed it. It has some really good like set pieces, but you know it's just so different. The overall tone, like I said before, goes away from any of that bleakness, that war
yeah,
inspiration, and it just kind of feels like it's just lacking. Like it doesn't quite know where
yeah,
it's going. It doesn't know where to go. Like someone was just making scenes up as they went along. Like this
yeah. It
part to this
feels very
part.
disjointed.
And I think even one thing to mention is the fact that I think even in the original story, the Triffids are there, but like any good story of these kind, it's not about the Triffids. It's about the bleakness of humanity and the way humanity
Yeah,
turns. Like any good zombie film is not actually about the zombies. It's normally about the way that humans turn
yeah,
and change against each other. That's why
yeah,
like George A. Romero's, Dawn of the Dead and trilogy and stuff like that. Yeah, zombies are fine, but the zombies are actually the subplot to the human stuff that's going on.
yeah,
The human problems that happen. Like the humans are the ones that cause the real problem half the time. And that's kind of what occurs here. Like they've completely like squashed all of that idea of no, humans are fantastic, we're great,
yeah. Humans are fine.
we are great. It has to be these alien monsters that are the problem, and it can't possibly be us. And maybe we'll throw a little bit of that, but most of that needs to go away. And if you try to talk back to me, I'll punch you, I'll hit you.
Yeah, I'll punch you. The West is the best, and it's an invasion by Russians. And
Yeah,
that's just how it is. Nobody
yeah.
else is bad. It's just the Russians. They're the invaders.
And
That's
I,
kind of
I,
how it feels.
I think it takes like a classic novel, but it's created it in a much more of a B movie kind of style. But sadly, it's just not thought out. It's not quite as fun as a standard creature feature B movie, and
No,
it's not as cleverly thought out enough to feel like a classic sci-fi like story. So
yeah,
it's just
it's very disjointed.
yeah, it's neither all, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of agree with that. You know, it's not it's not quite as campy or as B movie as it probably should have leaned towards. But then, like you're saying, if they've got to leave out a lot of the bleakness and a lot of that kind of subtext from the novel, then they probably should go maybe a bit more fun with it. Instead, it's quite disjointed. At times, it's quite like meandering because we get periods of time like where we don't really get any Triffids, we don't really get any action, and instead we just get like characters in a situation talking about like nothing really. You know, it just seems like they're constantly like, okay, let's go to the next space, and then there's no real kind of time for any character development or kind of anything like that. A lot of the characters I think are kind of vaguely, you know, memorable. You don't. There's none of them that stick out as kind of classic sci-fi, you know, heroes.
No,
Well,
they're
that
not.
leads us to the question, you know,
Yeah. Well, they're
of
not. They're not like just the character just for one sec. They're not very well fleshed out characters. Like although Bill Mason's there, we don't really feel like we learn anything about him.
no,
Susan's like a little blank slate of anything. And those are the lighthouse, the ones that are meant to be a couple. As I said, they're already like terribly like the dude. Just all we get is that he's an asshole,
yeah,
and it's just generally it's just a lot of the dialogue and so it's not where like I forgot to mention earlier this also has such a terrible line in it with the in the lighthouse when the researcher when they first go up the stairs he says stay behind, there's no point in getting killed by a plant. That's the line. Stay behind, there's no point in getting killed by a plant.
yeah,
Like what does that add to anything? Like she knows what's there. The woman knows what's around her. I was just like, that is just the worst bit of writing ever. Like
it's not great, is it?
to have that kind of a line, like it's like point out the obvious, the most obvious thing, like as if the
Yeah,
audience doesn't already know that there are killer plants around. Let's make it very clear.
yeah,
Yeah, woman,
it's
stay
just like
behind me.
yeah, and I
You don't want to
get
get
the
killed by a
spear.
plant. I'm planning to kill you later.
Yeah, I'm gonna kill you later after many years of unsuccessful marriage. I'm gonna kill you.
Anyway,
Yeah,
the big question, as you were mentioning, the big question. So, is it a must-see horror?
I mean it's very clear that to me it's not.
Yeah,
you know, I could see the argument of why they would put it on the poster. You know, because it is known as a very classic sci-fi, especially the story, the novel that it's taken from is a very famous and well received and quite it has a certain cult icon and quite cult status to it.
yeah,
So I can understand like a film on it being quite good, and maybe we got it wrong, and maybe it is like the '80s one where they went a bit more for it, and the effects were better, and they focused more on the bleakness and the actual story of it. But the 1962 version, no, it feels like massively disjointed, a bit of a slog at times. I thought the opening was good. The first act was good, and then after that, it just kind of plodded along and got a bit boring. You know?
yeah, yeah. I agree. It's definitely not. It's not a must-see horror, and the my main reason, my main criteria in my brain is the fact that I can just think of so many other horrors or sci-fis of the same era that are
Yeah,
just better made, and they are, and they have as many good set pieces as this one. This one has some good, but they're kind of held back by the fact that in many scenes the Triffids are kind of hard to show and kind of hard to
yeah,
record. And just generally, it's the fact the plot. If we're talking about the birds, the original Blob, or
yeah.
even the original War of the Worlds. I haven't seen that one in a long time, but I remember it holding up better than this. They're all much better plotted, much better laid out films.
Yeah,
And they don't just throw aside all of the kind of the subtext and the messaging that came from the original source material. Or they're just more fun, in just that way.
yeah,
And that's the problem. Like this one is neither there here, and I'd say you can you quite often we'll say, oh, you've got to watch it though because it's just a classic. It is, and sometimes it's a classic because it's old. But I don't think this one falls in that criteria. I think it's a case of
no,
I could point out several films that should see of that era that will show you how good films from the 40s, 50s, and 60s can be. When people
yeah,
are like, nah, they're all out of date, they look terrible. No, there are several that are just as high quality, like The Birds, as films we make today. But this one is not one of them. It's just not. It's not a well-made film. It's structurally all over the place. It has poor characters and generally, apart from a few good set pieces, the train, the opening in London, the attack with the convicts. Those are some standout scenes, yeah, but it's just not enough to make an overall good film, and it's definitely a not a must-see horror for me.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's it. We've taken the seawater to the Triffids, and we've freed the scourge from the planet. And as always, if you've enjoyed this show, please hit that subscribe button, leave us a lovely review. Come and let us know your thoughts on Day of the Triffids, whether we've, offended you by saying it's not must-see horror and tearing it a new one in a way. We were all right to it. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. And we will see you next week for another thrilling episode. Take care. Bye bye.